The studio lights hit hard. The audience was loud, energized. Rosie O'Donnell sat forward in her chair, her arms crossed, her tone blazing with purpose. "Let me be clear, Denzel," she snapped, voice rising above the hum. "Silence in the face of injustice is complicity. I will be loud. I will shout if that's what it takes. Women, especially queer women like me, have been silenced long enough." There was thunderous applause from her side of the audience. Denzel didn't move. He sat tall, a quiet storm behind calm eyes. When the applause died, he leaned into his mic. His voice? Low. Controlled. Unshakable. "And yet here you are," he said, "on national television, with millions listening, shouting not because you're unheard, but because you think the volume makes the truth louder. It doesn't." The air tightened. Rosie blinked. "What did you just say to me?" Denzel didn't blink. "I said volume isn't value. Pain doesn't need a megaphone to be real. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the most afraid." A hushed gasp moved through the crowd. Rosie leaned back, half laughing. "You think I'm afraid?" "No," Denzel replied. "I think you're performing fear. And that's far more dangerous." The moderator shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but didn't dare interrupt. "This isn't a theater," Denzel continued. "And I didn't come here for applause or hashtags. I came to talk about responsibility, accountability. That doesn't come with yelling. It comes with standing firm when nobody claps." Rosie stood up, pacing. Her jaw was locked tight. "So you're saying my pain doesn't matter because I raise my voice?" "No," he said slowly. "I'm saying if your message gets lost in your rage, maybe it wasn't the message people needed in the first place." Silence. You could hear a pin drop. The studio wasn't sure whether to clap or hold their breath. Rosie's face flushed red, fists clenched. She turned to the audience and asked, "Y'all hearing this?" Some nodded. Some didn't move. Denzel adjusted his mic one last time for the segment. "It's not courage if it's loud. Sometimes, real strength whispers the truth while everyone else is screaming." Rosie O'Donnell didn't sit back down. Instead, she planted her feet on the stage floor, pointing toward Denzel with a fury that bypassed performance and slammed headfirst into personal history. "You know what, Denzel," she said, voice cracking, "you don't get to define my struggle. You don't get to tell me how to express pain that you've never felt." Denzel raised an eyebrow. "Are you talking about pain, or are you talking about volume again?" The crowd murmured. Rosie stepped closer to the moderator's table. "You're damn right I'm talking about both. You think just because you're calm, you're right? Because you sit there with your arms folded and your words polished like glass, it makes you more valid?" "No," Denzel replied smoothly. "But it does mean I'm thinking before I speak." Rosie scoffed. "You don't know what it's like to live in a world that mocks your identity before you even open your mouth. And you don't know what it's like," Denzel cut in, "to be expected to carry a community on your back and be crucified for every misstep." Silently. The room froze again. Now it was deeper. Now it was real. Rosie's tone softened for a split second. "You think we're so different?" "No," Denzel said, locking eyes with her. "I think we're so alike, it scares you." The moderator finally jumped in. "Let's dial this back." But neither of them was listening. Rosie turned back to the audience. "He wants you to whisper. I want you to roar. Because we've tried quiet. And they still ignore us. They still murder us. They still legislate us out of existence." Denzel stood. Not fast. Not aggressive. He simply stood. And the entire studio tilted on its axis. "I'm not asking people to be quiet," he said. "I'm asking them to be heard. Yelling into the void might feel good, but it doesn't build bridges. It burns them." The crowd was now visibly split, some clapping loudly for Rosie's passion, others nodding silently at Denzel's restraint. Two forces, two truths. One stage. Within hours of the broadcast, a 57-second clip of Denzel and Rosie's exchange was trending globally. The caption on one version simply read, "Wisdom versus volume, pick a side." Cable news grabbed it first. "Truth versus noise?" one pundit asked. "Or is this just two wounded people bleeding on a stage?" On Twitter, the battle lines were drawn. Denzel is everything the movement needs: calm, sharp, powerful. At Real Justice Now. Rosie was right. We've been quiet for centuries. Time to scream. At Voice for the Voiceless. They're both right. And that's what makes it terrifying. At Middle Ground Media. Meanwhile, Rosie posted a photo of her from that night with the caption, "Not sorry." Denzel said nothing. Not on Twitter. Not on Instagram. But his silence spoke louder than many could handle. That evening, CNN ran a special segment titled, "When Icons Collide, Culture, Pain, and the Power of Words." A media psychologist said, "What we saw was a live manifestation of unresolved national trauma, expressed in two very different languages." Backstage, the atmosphere was tense. Producers whispered about canceling the next episode. Sponsors were concerned. Emails flooded the network demanding answers, explanations, and more airtime. But one thing was clear: America was watching. Not just the show, but the mirror it had suddenly become. In a follow-up post, a young viewer wrote, "I've never seen someone say, 'Be calm,' and make it feel like a war cry. Denzel just changed the way I hear silence." The battle wasn't over. It had just evolved. The following morning, Rosie sat down for an exclusive live stream titled, "What They Won't Let You Say." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a softening. Instead, she looked directly into the camera and said, "I don't owe anyone silence. I'm not Denzel. I don't whisper when people are dying." The comments section exploded. Some cheered her defiance. Others begged her to stop digging. She ended the stream with a chilling smile. "Tell Denzel, this isn't over. Not by a long shot." That same night, Denzel returned to the studio. No cameras. No crowd. Just a chair, a table, and a recording device. The network aired the footage during prime time. No introduction. No host. Just Denzel, pressing play. It was a raw audio clip. A conversation recorded months ago between Rosie and a political consultant. Her voice was unmistakable. "People don't care about nuance. They want a scream. So I give them one." Gasps filled living rooms across the country. Was it taken out of context? Maybe. But the damage was done. Denzel sat silently through the playback, his eyes fixed on the floor. Then, he finally spoke. Pain doesn't need to be performed. If it's real, it speaks for itself. He stood up, nodded to the camera, and walked off. No hashtags. No tweets. Just the sound of a nation thinking. By noon, every major outlet had one headline. Rosie caught in leaked audio, "Denzel responds without raising his voice." Talk shows were ablaze. Pundits circled like vultures. Some defended Rosie. "It's performance art, she's always been provocative." Others praised Denzel. "He doesn't perform pain. He honors it." But the real twist came at 4:17 p.m. A video surfaced from an unexpected source, Sean Penn. Yes, Sean, once a fierce critic of Denzel's politics, was standing in front of a black backdrop, wearing no makeup, no styling. His words were sharp. "I've argued with Denzel in every possible way. But I've never doubted one thing: the man doesn't fake it. And what we're seeing from Rosie? It's theater. Not truth." Social media cracked open. #PenWithDenzel trended in under 15 minutes. Rosie's camp fired back. "Of course men are lining up to protect each other. What else is new?" But damage was spreading like oil on water. Then came an even stranger move. The Truth vs. Power Network, where Rosie made her original speech, aired a segment without her. The anchor said only one sentence. "We stand with voices that uplift, not perform." And cut to black. Rosie was silent. Denzel? Still hadn't tweeted a word. But the silence was now louder than Rosie's shouting ever was. Rosie's team called an emergency meeting. The leaked audio, Sean Penn's rebuke, the network's cold shoulder, it was all spiraling. She needs to take the stage again, one aide insisted. Control the narrative, another added. Rosie stared at the wall. Book me a town hall. Somewhere big. Somewhere loud. Meanwhile, Denzel wasn't in any studio. He had shown up, unannounced, at a community center in Newark. No media. No lights. Just folding chairs, parents, kids, and a mural that read, "We matter even if they don't watch." He didn't say much. Just listened. A single mother stood up and said, "They call what we live through drama, but they never stay long enough to see how we survive it." Denzel nodded. That was it. Someone filmed it quietly from their phone and posted it with the caption, "This is what accountability looks like." By sunset, the clip hit 3 million views. Rosie's town hall, meanwhile, was being prepped like a Broadway set, big lights, branded mic flags, and a screen behind her that read, "Reclaiming Real." But something was off. People weren't tuning in. They were replaying the Newark video. Again and again. Denzel never raised his voice. Never clapped back. He just stood with people no one usually sees. And suddenly, Rosie's microphone felt too loud. The email was sent. The offer was public. Rosie had tagged him in the post herself. At Denzel official, let's have the conversation. America deserves it. 1 hour. Just you and me. No scripts. No edits. Producers prepped for a ratings spike. CNN cleared a primetime slot. Twitter lit up with split-screen mock-ups. But Denzel never replied online. He sent his message another way. While Rosie rehearsed her opening monologue under LED studio lights, Denzel was walking through the remains of a shuttered high school gym in Detroit. Graffiti on the bleachers. A cracked basketball hoop. Broken glass, but voices rising. He looked into the camera of a local grassroots news outlet and simply said, "You don't heal the wound with a spotlight. You start by sitting in the dark and listening to those who've bled the longest." That 20-second clip broke through like thunder. No music. No cuts. Just raw clarity. Rosie's team panicked. Should we cancel the show? No. Double down. Play the empathy card. But by airtime, viewers had made their choice. Hashtags like #ListenLikeDenzel and #TruthWithoutStage were trending. And when the broadcast began, Rosie sat under the glare of lights, alone. No co-host. No conversation. Just questions echoing louder than any applause. How do you reclaim real, when the people you claim to speak for are watching someone else? Rosie stepped back toward the center of the stage, her hands cutting through the air as she leaned into the microphone. "You want to dress up judgment in the name of truth, Denzel?" she barked. "What you're doing isn't courage, it's curated masculinity pretending to be wisdom. You're just another man uncomfortable with change." A few cheers came from her corner of the panel. But they were hesitant, thin, uncertain. Denzel didn't blink. He leaned forward, adjusted his mic with a soft click, and his voice dropped low, like a slow-moving tide before a storm surge. "Rosie," he began, "I've seen change. I've lived it. But don't confuse volume with vision. You're shouting in a world that's already deaf from noise." The studio quieted again. He didn't raise his voice, he never needed to. His words carried weight not because they were louder, but because they were heavier. "You said this is about masculinity hiding behind wisdom? Let's flip that. What if your version of progress is hiding behind outrage? What if the people you silence are the ones who've been silent too long?" Rosie started to cut in, but he held up one hand. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't commanding. It was calm. And somehow, that made it even more commanding. I've stood in rooms full of broken men. Not loud men. Not men who bark. Men who cry behind closed doors because the world told them silence was strength. You call that fragile? He looked directly at her now. I call it buried. And I'm tired of digging up bodies of people who were never allowed to speak until they screamed. The panel was dead silent. And you, he motioned gently toward her, you think this is about disagreement. But it's about dismissal. You're not debating ideas. You're erasing the ones that make you uncomfortable. That's not progress. That's censorship dressed in activism. The moderator tried to interject, sensing the moment slipping from their hands, but even they knew, this was bigger than ratings. Denzel turned to the audience. If we want truth, he said, we have to let people speak it, even when it doesn't come in the package we prefer. I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to make sure no kid watches this and thinks their silence is strength. Rosie's jaw clenched. But she didn't speak. Not because she couldn't. Because there was nothing left to say. Rosie took a breath, her chest rising sharply as if she'd been winded. Still, she wasn't backing down. She leaned into her mic, her tone colder now. You keep talking about pain like it's a badge, Denzel, she said. But when men use their stories to shut down women who've been silenced for generations, that's not bravery, it's manipulation. Gasps scattered across the room. Denzel didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, interlaced his fingers, and paused long enough for the silence to thicken. I didn't speak to silence you, he said finally, voice steady. I spoke because silence is how people disappear. And Rosie, I refuse to let stories, real stories, get turned into political currency. She tried to interrupt, but he continued, his gaze locked. You accuse me of using emotion like it's a weapon. But you forget, emotion isn't weakness. It's data. It's lived experience. It's the scar tissue we carry in rooms like this. Then he leaned forward. Let me ask you something, he said. If a woman cries out in a room full of men, and no one listens, is she emotional? Or is she alone? And if a man finally speaks up in a room where no one expects him to feel anything, why is that suddenly a threat? The crowd grew still again. No one reached for their coffee. No one shuffled notes. Rosie's face hardened, but even she felt the momentum shift. You can't measure truth by gender, Denzel said. Pain isn't assigned by politics. And if this conversation makes you uncomfortable, then good. It should. He paused, then added. Because comfort is where lies grow. A few members of the audience erupted in applause, genuine, involuntary, not the forced clapping of a partisan crowd. Rosie's fingers drummed against the desk. Your problem, she said, nearly spitting it out, is that you think being quiet makes you right. No, Denzel replied calmly, I think being right makes me quiet. And with that, he leaned back again, eyes on her, composed. Rosie turned her gaze to the floor. The moderator didn't dare speak. The air had changed. The debate wasn't over. But something had ended. And everyone in the room felt it. As Rosie attempted to regain control of the conversation, her tone dipped into sarcasm. So what now, Denzel? You want applause for being the quietest guy in the room? Denzel calmly looked at her, then turned to the audience. No, he said. I want us to stop rewarding noise and start recognizing integrity. The room fell into a deeper silence than before. Rosie shifted in her chair, visibly uncomfortable. The camera panned across the studio, catching the audience leaning forward, some nodding in agreement, others stone-faced in reflection. Denzel continued, if being loud made you right, every bully would be a hero. But real courage is listening. Real courage is knowing when not to speak. For the first time in the entire segment, Rosie was speechless. Her smirk faded. She wasn't defeated, just unsettled. The moderator, sensing the shift, wrapped things up. That's all the time we have today. But as the lights dimmed and the outro music played, it was clear, Denzel hadn't just won an argument. He'd changed the atmosphere. A new kind of silence lingered, not one of suppression, but of awakening, and just like that, the applause died down, not because the show ended, but because the truth finally spoke louder than the noise. In a world where volume is often mistaken for strength, Denzel reminded us all that courage doesn't have to shout, it just has to stand. If this moment shook you, if it made you pause, then maybe, just maybe, you heard more than words tonight. You heard a reckoning. Thanks for watching. But don't just scroll, speak up, share, and let the truth echo louder than the performance. This was more than a clash. This was a line drawn in the sand. Which side are you on?